Oh, I'm here with Benjamin. He's been nice enough. Actually, I had to bribe him a little bit, but I'm taking this at 4:30 downtown to go to the Private Equity Summit where they talk about family office investment preferences and also how to raise a lot of capital by working with family offices in a real value-added way. So let's head down to the conference.
Just give a little split.
The hedge fund book, and then it's a training manual for capital raising professionals. But it is a book I wrote in 2010, and it's basically where I interviewed a bunch of hedge fund executives and put my thoughts along with those into a book for Wiley. So my goal in speaking here today is to basically show you some really practical, but maybe not common talked about methods of raising capital from family offices. And specifically, this is geared towards private equity funds, of course, since it's a private equity summit, but it is relevant to a few other types of fund management firms as well. Most of these strategies can be ported over to raising capital for other types of things from family offices. And what our firm does is basically try to provide educational resources for the industry that kind of removes some of the secrecy and kind of grayness around family offices, capital raising, hedge funds and private equity funds, and we do that in a number of ways. We've written over 8,000 blog posts on the internet. We've produced over 1,000 training videos. I've written close to 10 books now, spoken at over 50 conferences in 15 countries, and we're just really dedicated to giving away as much as possible on these topics, because we find that the more we give away on capital raising in family offices and hedge funds, the more we share our knowledge, the more relationships and the more opportunities are coming to us, and it just helps the whole industry. We get 200 to 400 emails every day from people who have read an article that we wrote, and then they have a question, or they say just thanks for the article, etc. So that's the way we do business. We just try to give away a lot, and it kind of comes around eventually in many unexpected ways. Just like everything you hear at the conference, many of us are from different jurisdictions, so check with compliance before doing anything that I say, just so you don't get in trouble. And this is just a quick summary, again, of our firm. I'm not going to spend much time on my background, just get right to the meat of what I'm going to talk about. But in my past, I've raised over $250 million from high-end wealth management firms and family offices. I also have the 35,000 member Family Office Association called the Family Offices Group. We also have 77,000 members in our private equity association called the Private Equity Investment Group. And they're both free to join. I'm not trying to sell something here. They're 100% free. You can discuss things with other people in the industry, connect with others in the industry. You can look for your next job. You can hire someone through there. And it's just something that we've been creating over the past 4 years and working on. When I say we, our team is based in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Portland, Oregon, on the west coast of the United States. We have 8 full-time professionals and then some part-time professionals that help us out. And 6 of those are in the United States and 2 are in Brazil. All right, so before I get into the actual top 5 strategies for raising capital, I just wanted to go over a little bit more on my perspective and a little bit more on the perspective of what family offices are looking for. To start with, I've been working with family offices and capital raising for almost 10 years now, and with family offices more specifically for around 7 years. And recently, because of the hedge fund book that was mentioned earlier, I got a book contract with Wiley to write a book on family offices, because there's not very many books written on the topic, and lots of them that are out just have a lot of statistics in them and not a lot of direct insight or direct information straight from family offices. So what I did was interviewed, from last June until December of 2011, I interviewed 36 top family offices, including multi-billion-dollar single-family offices, mid-sized multifamily offices, as well as top 30 and top 10 family offices around the world. And I recorded all those interviews and used a lot of the transcripts within this new book that's about to come out on family offices. And the reason I say that is that even if you don't believe that any of my experience is worth anything. A lot of what I'm going to share with you today is directly from the mouths of top family offices around the globe. So even if my experience was worth zero, I think their advice is worth a lot, and they're usually so secretive that it's hard to get information directly from them. You're usually lucky to get a quote in a newspaper, and then you have to kind of hope it wasn't taken out of context in some way, I guess. So that's where a lot of what I'm going to talk about is coming from today. In my firm, what we do every day is think about the family office industry and capital raising. On top of running the association, as you might have heard on the panel, Richard Wilson Capital Partners tries to connect fund managers to family offices. We're a capital raising firm. We're engaged by fund managers, and most capital raisers try to raise capital from 20 different sources. We don't really look at what pension funds want or what endowments want or individuals want. We only care about what family offices want. So we're just really laser focused on the needs of family offices. And really, these strategies I share with you today, these are 5 strategies that I know work for sure because my firm uses them every single day. And so these aren't just theory-based ideas, they're really things that I know work in the industry. There's really 6 things I have up there, but there's 5 unique ones that are important to family offices. These are really like priorities that they look at, and this is something that got further refined by my work on the book. I knew a lot about family offices, but having them openly talk for a full hour each and be able to ask them whatever questions I wanted to, I really got to dig into how they build their portfolios, what they're most afraid of, what they're trying to do with their family office. And really the number one thing that they want is capital preservation. They want to protect the capital that was built and not lose it, and that's more important than anything else. They're not looking for 35% returns for the most part. They're not looking for something that is tax-free, but then could lose principal. They might lose some of their principal in the investment. They don't want to see that. So number one, I'm looking for capital preservation. 2, I think they're looking for growth. Again, I think a misconception is that family offices have so much wealth, they want something that's very tax efficient, and that's more important than growth. But many times during the interviews and in my conversations with family offices, even this week, people talk about how they don't want the tail wagging the dog. They don't want to optimize their portfolio for tax and then have no growth, and then some of their investments lose principal. And again, they're in a bad position. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, and that's why I wanted to share it here today. Tax efficiency is something that's on their top 5 list of importance in my experience. The next thing on the list up there is income. And income components of a portfolio, it's interesting, recently it's been more challenging to get income. Some traditional sources have kind of dried up. And the reason I put that $100 million, there's kind of a change in their need for income, is that I've found that those family offices, specifically those that are single family offices and have far over 100 million in assets, have typically less of a short-term need for income, whereas very large single family offices, they have enough capital that they can meet their capital call requirements, they can meet their family needs with just a very small percentage of their total net worth. Smaller family offices are much different. They might really need a strong component of income in their portfolio as a total percentage of their investments. It's more important. Next I put up here capital preservation again, because I think I almost put it as number 2 because they care about that, in my experience, more than just about anything else. And then fraud risk and just, with the different scandals that are always going on, I think that's something that came up again and again in my conversations with family offices and their top priorities. They want to avoid, getting their full principal taken out through fraud. So again, it goes back to capital preservation. So it might sound like I'm repeating myself. I just want to make the point that they want to protect the capital above everything else. And one thing that's interesting that is unique about Asia is the amount of first-generational wealth here versus second and third generation. And it's important to note because that does change a little bit of this. Those who are the head of their family office or a patriarch of their family office, and it's first-generational wealth, typically those people are willing to take on more risk, willing to do more direct investments, willing to specialize their family office within the industry where they made their money, and they try to leverage that information advantage or network advantage they might have within the industry where they created their wealth. Whereas second and third and fourth generation families typically are even more focused on the capital preservation factor. They typically want to diversify strategically, the more traditional type investment approach in terms of spreading out their investments. And they're much less likely to be what I call kind of a sandbox strategy, where you're just playing in that little square where you have all of your expertise and your insights. So that's one difference, because in the United States and Western Europe, probably 70% of family offices have clientele which are second, third, fourth generation wealth. And I think that is kind of reverse here. I think it's probably 40 to 60% first generation wealth, if not much higher, depending on what part of Asia you're talking about. And so that'll affect the priorities of the family office for sure. And another thing that affects the priorities of a family office is not only the first generation versus second generation, but also where it's based. In Australia and even here in Singapore, the family office industry is relatively immature compared to Western Europe or the United States. And it's growing quickly, and there's a lot of huge opportunity here for family offices and those in the industry. But where you're based can change what type of team the family office has in place, what capabilities they have. Like on one of the panels earlier, we were talking about managing currency risk. I don't know of many family offices in Singapore that have someone on their team that do that, but I know that some in Europe and the United States do. And I don't know every family office here, of course, so I'm sure that a few of them might, but I think that that's something that comes with having a larger family office structure. You can afford to have more of those seven-figure experts on your team naturally as the family office gets larger. So I wanted to start with this before I get into the actual capital raising suggestions, just so you see kind of where I'm coming from and what family offices are looking for in my experience. All right, so these are the 5 areas I'm going to cover. The first is having a laser focus, and I was happy to see that in one of the panels it was suggested that managers don't have a clear enough focus. That's actually my first point here. And the second thing is having an expert status in your niche or your industry. The third thing is having a long-term cognitive bias and a long-term approach to everything you do in your fund. The fourth is building a referral network. And the fifth, which tries to tie it all together with something a bit more robust but easy to understand, is creating your capital raising funnel. All right, so I'm going to start with laser focus, and this was pretty self-explanatory. It's something that I'm trying to do in my own business, in my own capital raising efforts. For example, we only represent fund managers that have deep talent on their teams, that have a lot of assets under management, typically over 300 million, but sometimes over 100 million. And we only raise capital from family offices. So we're very focused. This is something that immediately after doing it, we started to become more effective. And I know that fund managers in the past who have tried to raise capital from 20 sources and then narrow it down to just high net worth individuals and wealth management firms, or just institutional consultants and pension funds, they very quickly find out that that was a bad decision, and they don't make any progress for 18 months or 12 months, or they find huge success. I find that the people that flounder the longest is the ones who go after 5 types of investors all at the same time with a small team. I think that's kind of a death sentence, because it can take a couple of years to get feedback that way. And meanwhile, your competition has raised a lot of capital. When you're super focused on one investor niche, for example, you might focus on family offices just in Australia, New Zealand, or you might focus on wealth management firms that have a connection to some geography that your investments are connected to. Focusing on that specifically can allow you to listen to those people's needs and just adjust everything you do very quickly to them. Family offices as a whole is a massive group of investors. When you look at the number of investors you can go after for a private equity fund, it's literally, over 100,000 people you could be trying to meet with. So when you narrow it down just to pension funds, there's still a lot of people you potentially meet with. So you really have to, even though eventually you'll want to go to those different sources of investors, if you go towards them all at once, you'll be very ineffective and slow moving. One approach that I found works, whether you take this advice or not, is what I call kind of the doctor's approach to raising capital. And if you go to the doctor, hopefully when you get there and you're going there for a reason, perhaps say your knee hurts, and you sit down with the doctor, as soon as you sit down, he doesn't say, you should take this pharmaceutical drug, this will cure you. It's not the first sentence out of his mouth. He typically asks how you're doing, if you had any irregular want something or other lately? Does your knee hurt when you sit down? Does it hurt when you climb the stairs? Does it hurt when I poke here? And he asks a whole bunch of questions to figure out your exact pain and your exact situation. And by doing that, what he's doing is listening to your needs, listening to your situation. Whatever he says after that, you're probably going to trust. If he says, based on everything you've told me, it's probably this or this, why don't we start with this pharmaceutical drug? You're going to trust what he says a lot more than if you come in there and he tries to sell you on consuming this drug. You know, doctors aren't seen as salesmen, and that's a good thing. And us raising capital, we don't want to be seen as people that are just trying to sell everybody we meet with, no matter what their situation. So I would suggest taking the same approach. 60 or 80% of your meetings, you should be asking questions to the investor, whether it's an individual or a pension fund or a family office, and be asking questions most of the time so you know exactly what their situation is, what their past investment experience has been in this area, if they've gotten burned before, what they're afraid of, how they want something structured. And then after that, you present to them the opportunity of maybe working together. And that allows you to customize everything you do. You actually listen to them instead of just pitching at them. And they're much more likely to trust what you're saying after you've actually listened to their needs and their situation. So you have one example of this. Just yesterday afternoon, I was meeting with a family office here downtown and was using this very same approach. And we got through about half the meeting, and it became very obvious there was no direct way of working together. But the meeting, he didn't see it as a waste of time at all, so I was able to suggest a few people I could connect him with, a couple of resources we have at the Family Offices group, and I left on a good note, and I'll send him a copy of my Family Office book when it comes out. But just left as a good, strong relationship, which goes to kind of the referral network I talk about later, and it was still a positive meeting, even though there's no potential of that specific family office for the type of capital raising I do. So that's just an example, just from this week, about how it can help, hopefully, through everything I suggested, in raising capital. But it's good not to, waste your time by going to a meeting if the answer is no. It can still be a beneficial relationship long term. All right. So the second suggestion I have for raising a lot of capital is developing your expert status in the industry. So if you're working on Mongolian infrastructure investments, you should try to become an expert on that region and be known as the expert to go to on Mongolian investments in general, maybe, since it's so niche, or Mongolian infrastructure investments. If somebody looks for that, or somebody asks 20 people in a room who's an expert on that, hopefully your name would come up. If someone searches on a book website, hopefully you've written a book on that topic, and you're probably the only person ever to have written a book on that topic. And what does that mean? It means people see you as the expert they should be working with. No matter what niche you're in, there's always room for more experts and ways to add value. And they say knowledge doubles every 18 months, and that it moves so quickly. Yet most of us move relatively slowly on taking advantage of kind of expertise building opportunities. There's a statistic saying that 85% of business people would like to write a book someday, but only 0.5% ever have. And if you look around our industry, for example, in the family office industry, there's not very many books on it. When you look at capital raising, there's not very many books written on it. When you look at private equity investing in Southeast Asia, there's not many books written on it. So again, writing a book, no, the capital's not going to flood in because somebody read your book. But this is one thing, that can help you out of 20 different strategies you need to be using, because the environment is so competitive. You need to use all of the strategies you can. It's not choosing one strategy and saying, well, I do this, or we already have our system in place, and just sticking with that, because your competition is constantly innovating, constantly trying to grow their brand awareness and their expertise. And when people talk about a team having high pedigree or respecting a team, or the team is most important, you hear that all the time. Part of that is when someone reads their bio, does it sound like an authoritative person that they can trust and who's committed to their industry and has experience in their industry, and it's not somebody who ran chicken franchise restaurants and they started a private equity firm the next day. It's someone who's really dedicated to their niche and taking a long-term approach to kind of dominating that area of investments, and that can be part of your unique edge in the marketplace. So this is something that I think is kind of written off by some people because everybody's been busy and nobody has time to write, nobody has time to do some of these extra things. But I think it's really important, if you're dedicated long-term to raising a lot of capital, to build yourself into the expert for your niche, or the niche within a niche. There's a lot of benefits that are mostly unseen. One example and I have no connection to this person or his funds in any way. I don't make money by putting his face up here, is Andrew Lowe from MIT. He's a professor, and he's written a lot of research papers, given a lot of speeches, hired as a consultant and advisor by many people. And he became somewhat of a celebrity in the industry probably 4 to 7 years ago. And everybody knew him, knows him, and trusts him. And since then, he's kind of parlayed that into, I believe, he's associated with a line of funds. And I have no idea how those are performing, or if they did well, or if they're good or bad or not. But the point is, he's leveraged that, and that's somebody who, came from an academic background. He's leveraged that expertise into, I'm sure the fund management company loves having them on the board, because that opens doors, that gets meetings, and it adds some star power and some pedigree to your team that people kind of respect. So that's how the power of this kind of work, and that's someone else in the industry that's using it pretty effectively, I think. I want to share an example of how this works, and I think a good one would be that 2 weeks ago, we finished writing a white paper on the growth of family offices in Singapore, and you guys probably were emailed that through IQPC. And we emailed that out. They emailed it out to their list. We emailed it out to about 250,000 people on our list as well, mentioning that I was coming here to speak. And we got over 1,000 phone calls and 1,000 emails total response to that one white paper that we wrote. I met with one $3 billion hedge fund for lunch a couple days ago, and they said that not only did they get it directly, but they had their colleague in London and one of their team members forward it to him. So he heard about it from 3 different sources. So that's why he had sent me the email to meet. He said, I guess we have to meet because it's something we're interested in doing. That's an extreme example because most people don't, have the ability to send it out to 250,000 people. But that is a really recent example of how I'm using this, not just telling you that you should use something to grow your business. It's something that I'm actually using, and it helps me with meeting with family offices, being seen as someone who's dedicated to their industry, and being able to generate relationships more quickly. Another example that's different than that one and isn't as extreme is when I was in Boston raising capital. I had a really hard time doing it at first. At that point, I was charging my clients $10,000 a month retainers for capital raising, and I went 13 months without raising any capital. The pressure starts to build, and every week the fund manager is putting more pressure to get some capital in, or you're done basically. And so at that point, I basically had to try different strategies, and I tried, going broad, I tried going narrow, I tried focusing on different types of investors. And one thing that really helped was just gathering information and white papers on the type of investment that I was promoting and providing that to them in a folder. At that point, I didn't write anything. All I did was take the work of other people and print it off, put it in a folder, and say, here's some research on how this fits into a portfolio. And they liked the value of just that. I didn't have the credibility factor that I had written and stuff, but I had provided them a source of value because I was a conduit of knowledge at that point, and I was educating them on how they could fit my proposals into their overall investment portfolio. And so that was really relatively early on in my career, and it was something that made a big difference. And we started raising capital every week, and then more capital every week, and then I started adding on more of these strategies like I'm talking about today to what I was doing to raise more capital. And with everything that I say today, or at any conference you go to, there's basically 2 reactions to anything you hear. You can basically say, do you have a quick question?
5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes? Okay. So I'll have to go a little bit faster through the rest of these suggestions. But basically there's 2 reactions. You can say, I already know that, or how good am I at that? And so with everything I talk about here in the next 5 minutes, maybe I'll try to squeeze 7 or 8 in here. That could be the 2 reactions. Just blow it off as something you already do and you already know, or you could actually figure out how to apply this to raise more capital. All right, so next I want to talk about long-term bias. And basically this is something where family offices, like I was speaking about earlier today, are really long-term view, and over the long term they want to protect their capital, protect the wealth of their family or that of the clients of the family office. So anything you can do to overinvest in your team, build out your systems, have excellent reporting, take the time to really sit down face-to-face with your investors and look at every detail of how you run your fund and make it long-term biased. The incentives you put for your team, multi-year, equity sharing or profits that vest over a number of years, so people don't make a lot of money one year and then leave your fund the next year. Family offices like to see that in the managers they invest in, and we actively look for that in managers I try to raise capital for. Referral networks. There's a saying that the rich get richer, and this is part of the reason why, because they are relatively well connected to other well-off individuals with other opportunities or ways to partner together. Lots of people might see this slide and think this is easy once you have the network, but if you don't have the network, what do you do? This doesn't apply. But there's ways to create the network, and I challenge you to think of creative ways where you could get started by being helpful to a high net worth accountant or accounting firm, or a high net worth advisor or consultant. There was an investment banker on the panel earlier today. You could be helpful to them in 2 or 3 different ways, build a real strong relationship, and they might refer you to a family office eventually. There's many ways you can get plugged in on a very small, granular level to begin with, and then grow it from there instead of, I think sometimes it's easy to discount this as a real strategy. There's a saying by Jeffrey Gitomer that says, all things being equal, business is never equal. Like basically, at the end of the day, people want to do business with their friends. They don't want to do business with strangers. So things aren't equal. It's not fair, and that's good news, because if you make friends with the people and you have great relationships, now you have an unfair advantage in the marketplace. So, I think that's something to remember, is that it's not an even playing field. It's very uneven. It's very unfair. So you need to be on the right side of that unfair advantage if you want to raise a lot of capital. There was also a study done in 1998 that's not specific to capital raising, but it showed that the relationship between the person being sold and selling was a more important factor than the thing being sold. So the characteristics of the thing being sold could be changed and downgraded, but the relationship was more important. And I think that is true in our industry as well. There's a certain qualifying factors you have to have in place, but the relationship can be just as important as all the hard work you put into forming the fund and forming the team and putting the investments in place. And family offices tell me all the time that they won't invest in a manager, even if they have $5 billion, if they won't take the time to return their phone calls, answer their questions in a concise, professional manner, and pay attention to them. They don't want to be ignored by a large fund that's too good for their $10 million or their $50 million investment. All right, so this is pretty much the last slide or two here. I think just have 2 minutes, but basically this funnel, I'm not sure how clear it is, but my presentation will be on the website, and I'm recording it, so you'll be able to watch it again later if you'd like to. And basically this funnel represents how you can get investors into your fund using the things I'm talking about today. The top of the funnel, you can see articles, interviews you might do, white papers like the family office white paper I was just speaking about, books you might have written, giving speeches like the one I'm giving right now, having meetings with people, so one-on-one meetings, which I'm sure you already do with potential investors, and then getting capital in the door. And the point of showing it as a funnel is that we sent our recent article, or it was a white paper in that case, to 250,000 people. Only so many people are going to read it. Some of those people are going to buy a book. Some of those people are going to come here and speak with me in person. And then some of those people will want a one-on-one meeting on Friday, which I've had 3 or 4 meetings set up for this Friday already from being here today. And then some of those people, it might end up being an opportunity where it might be a fund manager we represent, or it might be capital raised and capital brought in through the door. So the point here is just to put as many people as possible in the top of the funnel, make it very, very broad, and then you're going to end up raising capital from more people because of multiple factors. You're seen as more credible. Some people will slowly move through this funnel and get to know you over a period of 7 years and slowly read articles you've written or seen you speak and then eventually want to work with you. Or it can happen very quickly and they might just see you speak and not have read anything you've written and they want to work with you immediately. Or they just read your book and then they want to work with you. So it can skip steps, but if you build it like this, then people can kind of trickle down through it and it creates a consistent flow of sources of capital that are approaching you, people who are calling you because they're interested in figuring out how to get access to that Mongolian investment, they're figuring out how to get access to best-of-breed fund managers that make sense for family offices. And this really does work. This is what I focus basically all my capital raising efforts on, and it's been working very well, and I think that this is something where most people won't take the time to do it, and that's the great thing, is that most of your competitors don't have the time for this and don't take the methodical approach to building a capital raising funnel. So if you do, you'll have that much more of an advantage in the marketplace. All right, so here are the 5 suggestions I had for raising capital. Being laser focused, building your expert status, having a long-term cognitive bias, a long-term approach to the marketplace, building your referral networks, and then building your capital raising funnel. here are 3 places you can go if you want to join our associations or networking groups for free, or take advantage of our resources. It's familyofficesgroup.com, privateequityiinvestmentgroup.com, and familyofficereport.com. All right, well, thank you.